Now it is my honor to introduce tonight's featured speaker, Thasunda Brown Duckett, President and Chief Executive Officer of TIAA. As TIAA's CEO, Duckett leads a company whose mission is defined by financial inclusion and opportunity, goals and values that she has upheld throughout her career. Duckett joined TIAA after serving in several different roles with Chase, where she led initiatives to diversify the talent pipeline in the financial industry and to enhance financial literacy among women and people of color. Early in her career, she was a director of emerging markets at Fannie Mae, where she led the implementation of national strategies designed to increase homeownership among Black and Hispanic Americans. In addition, Duckett founded the Otis and Rosie Brown Foundation in honor of her parents to recognize and reward those who use ordinary means to empower and uplift their community in extraordinary ways. She is passionate about helping communities of color close achievement gaps in wealth creation, educational outcomes, and career success. And she continues to hold leadership roles in a variety of professional organizations and on corporate boards. As an accomplished leader, role model, and advocate for women, we are delighted to have Thasunda Brown Duckett as tonight's featured speaker. So tonight's format is less of a keynote and more of a conversation. And I'm delighted to welcome the chair of ACE's Women's Network Executive Council to lead this conversation. Dr. Sakaki currently serves as president of Sonoma State University, and in that role, she is the first Japanese-American woman in the nation to lead a four-year college or university. Her distinguished career in higher education encompasses many areas of university leadership within both academic affairs and student affairs. She is a tireless champion for access and equity, and Dr. Sakaki has worked to develop responsive educational policies, cultivate legislative and community collaborations, foster effective retention strategies for diverse students and faculty, and promote the mission of public higher education in two of the largest university systems in the world. In her work with ACE's Women's Network, Dr. Sakaki constantly demonstrates her passion for and commitment to supporting and advocating for the next generation of women leaders in higher education. And the ACE Women's Network is not Judy's only connection to ACE. She is an ACE Fellow, and just as of today, a member of the ACE Board of Directors. So ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome these two distinguished women to the stage.
Thasunda, you are such a phenomenal woman. And in fact, you remind me of Maya Angelou's Phenomenal Woman poem. The fire in your eyes, the joy in your feet, the sun in your smile, the grace in your style. So who helped you to become this phenomenal woman?
I mean, wow. Phenomenal Woman, I love that. It's one of my favorite poems by Maya Angelou. Well, first let me say it's such a privilege to be here. And before we fully jump in, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge you, Ted, and all of ACE for all the work that you all do. And then clearly, I am simply a representation of the thousands of colleagues who work beside me to make sure that we deliver on our mission. And so thank you to all of my TIAA colleagues here in the room who work tirelessly for all of you. So to answer the question, wow, the list is long because clearly it takes a village. But I would first start with Otis and Rosie Brown. You know, I am first full generation integration. My father grew up in the segregated South in Louisiana. My mother grew up in Alabama. And here I am. My mother is a retired educator, but like I said yesterday, I don't think there's a such thing as retired educator because my mother is still educating. And my father worked in a warehouse for over 40 years. But they've inspired me because my father taught me to reach for the moon because even if I missed, I would be among the stars. He could not imagine me being in this room, but he knew that if I reached for the moon, there was no box, there was no ceiling. There was always the art of possibility. And my mother, who really just taught me to see everyone, anchored in our faith, anchored in the fact that kindness is at the core of who we are, definitely inspired me. And then lastly, I would say I'm on the shoulders of giants. The rent has already been paid. When I think about our culture, when I think about going all the way back to 1619, and here I am on the shoulders of enslaved people, through the segregated South, through Jim Crow, through the fact that there's only 3. I mean, like I said yesterday, when I was the CEO of the Consumer Bank, Rockefeller could not imagine this being a representation. But here I am, and now as the first woman CEO at TIAA, we get to do it all again.
Thasunda, you are one of 2, the very few Black women CEOs of a Fortune 500 company.
Yes.
So tell me, when you think of that fact, what do you feel? If you think about what that means for not just yourself, but other women, can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, there's so many emotions. I mean, first, you can't help but have gratitude and just be excited that, you know, there's only been 3 full-time Black women running a Fortune CEO seat, and 2 were named last year, myself and Roz, the first being Ursula Burns, the CEO of Xerox. And so you can't help but feel gratitude because, like I said, there's been so many people along the way cracking those ceilings, names who we will never know, but they played a role. But then you can't help but feel frustration because clearly 3, every year, 500, 500, 500, 3 ever, full time. I mean, so there is a little bit of frustration because you do know that talent is created equally, opportunity is not. And to think that there could only have ever been 3, 2 just named last year, clearly there is not full meritocracy. There's not a Latina. There's only 41, I think, women. So clearly when 61% of women are graduating from college, clearly there's opportunity that has not yet been fulfilled. And so then lastly, I feel a sense of urgency. You are the first Japanese American. The job is to make sure that you are not the only. Success is only defined when there's 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And so the work, there's still work to be done. And so yes, there's gratitude. Yes, there's frustration. And then it's like, just get busy. And hopefully I can be just another chapter of what it looks like to lead a Fortune 500, what the impact can mean when there's more women in roles, and clearly when there's women that are representing every hue across all of the beautiful mosaic that encompasses being a woman, then we know we are truly making real progress. So we are just getting started.
Wow.
Yeah. We are.
So tell us about your vision for TIAA, what you see for the company, for the future, and for our retirement.
I mean, you all know the story. It's over 100 years old. It goes back to Andrew Carnegie, who saw a professor retiring not with dignity, but in poverty. And here we are over 100 years later, and we still have 40% of all Americans running out of money. 83% of Black Americans who are retired have no retirement. And so the point is, that mission is still true, and the work is still required. And so my vision is one that dates back over 100 years. It's getting back to the basics and obsessing with the level of intentionality that say we at TIAA play an important role. We've paid out over $500 billion over 60 decades. Through the recession, through the depression, we were still here making sure that people can count on guaranteed lifetime income. And so the job to be done is first and foremost to double down on the essence of who we are, making sure that the plans are easy and that all of you, if you walked away and asked 2 questions, my job would be done today. One is to ask, are my employees on track? Not just faculty, but staff. And then secondly, what % of my employees have guaranteed income that will never run out? 1 in 10 girls will live to be 100. We are running out of money literally because we are living longer. And so if we all went back and asked those 2 questions, then I guarantee you I would receive an email that I could give to my great colleagues to follow up with all of you. The point is, the benefits that you all provide, the generosity that you all provide to invest in your employees and faculty, we have to make sure that our participants understand that they too can contribute. And how do we make sure that all of us are doing our part? Because that is the only way that we can truly make sure that all Americans, quite frankly, can retire with dignity. And so that is the bold vision, which is just making sure that there's more progress on the vision that started this company over 100 years ago.
So you've said that you rent our title, but we own our character.
Yes.
Can you talk about what that means for you?
Yeah, so I say this all the time. I rent my title, I own my character, and so I choose to show up as Thasunda because that's who I own. At a certain point in time, and I think it's so important, especially for all of us in leadership positions, because it gets narrow at the top. And as we continue to ascend, there will be a point in time where you will have to step aside. But it does not mean that your worth is not still there. It does not mean that there is not another mountain or hill to climb. And so what I recognize is that my title is rented. And so I choose to show up with my character, which goes all the way back to Otis and Rosie Brown. And clearly, I should not put all this weight into a title because my father was a stock handler, not the investment type, but the one who processed boxes. So clearly, if I set the bar of heroes based on rented titles, I would not see Otis Brown. And so I think it's important that we all recognize that our titles are rented and that we show up with our ownable assets. And if we do that, I think we will see every employee at our company. I think we will see the unseen. And quite frankly, we'll make more progress because we will understand that innovation, opportunity, vision, and ideas are not relegated to the most senior people in an organization. So yes, my title, even as a CEO of TIAA, which is a dope title, and I love it, but that title too is rented. So I choose to show up every day as Thasunda Brown Duckett. That's where my ownership lies.
This morning, we had a chance to share over breakfast, a cup of coffee, sort of stories as women, as mothers. And I shared with you that my oldest son was once told to go back where he came from. And you shared that on an important day when you had a very important interview in the corner office, that your son was called the N-word. Can you talk about, as a leader, as a mother, how you deal with racism and gender bias?
Yeah, I mean, being a Black woman being a mother, your life is not always compartmentalized in a way that allows you to just show up and lead business. And I remember, and I was sharing, that I was scheduled to do an interview for the New York Times, the corner office, which is such a wonderful accomplishment. But that day, I was dealing with my son being called the N-word. And for those of us who have experienced it, I was 5. My father grew up in the segregated South. I was 5. Clearly, we've made progress. But my son was called out of his name, not to encourage him, not to inspire him, but to marginalize him. And so when you go to work and you're leading a company, and you have to also deal with your child wanting to know, what did he do wrong? When you have to deal with your son recognizing that not once, but twice, but 3 times life has given him an unfair hand, and he's asking me why, and that his innocence had to get burst at 10. He lives a really great life, but at 10, he was reminded. So why do we share those stories? Because it's important to understand that we cannot always compartmentalize life. And in fact, I brought that story into the halls of my company and shared it with the New York Times, because that was what's on my frontal. Because first and foremost, how can I lead that day when my son was hurting? And I thank God that actually it happened that way, because it allowed me to tell the story to other executives, to ultimately the world, that even though, yes, the mother is a CEO, even though, yes, you have all of these wonderful accolades, my 10-year-old was called out his name. And at what time and at what decade and at what moment will we be able to just simply call people by their given name and not by a name that is meant to hurt them or harm them or to marginalize them before they even got started in life? And so that's what we have to deal with.
You know, one of the top issues that higher education leaders face is mental health.
Yeah.
We're concerned about our students, our faculty and staff. What insights can you share from your experience in leading, particularly during this pandemic, that may be lessons for all of us?
Okay, I talked a little bit about this yesterday, and so I hope we're all ready for our own truth serum, are we? So just like when we're on a plane and the flight attendant says we must first put on the mask before we can help someone else, I think on the topic of mental health, we as leaders have to subscribe to that, because the truth is we have to put on our mask to make sure that we are healthy in order to be able to truly face what's going on with students, what's going on with faculty and staff. And so I shared my story that when you're navigating a company, especially during the pandemic, and there was no playbook. And at the time, I led 50,000 people, being the CEO of the consumer bank at Chase. And every day you're wondering, did I do a good job? Life or death moments. How do you empower everyone to make decisions? But at the same time, there were wildfires in California that I was navigating. There was the murder of George Floyd. And there was my son, once again, in my office, at work, at home, and came up to me and said, "Mommy, why? Why? Why do white people think they're better than us?" That broke me. It broke me. I had my lowest moment too. Am I the only one? And so the truth is, it's okay to not be okay. Paul Laurence Dunbar in 1913 wrote the poem, "We Wear the Mask," and here we are in 2022, navigating through a pandemic, recognizing that we all wear a mask. But as we think about mental health, I think it's important for leaders to be vulnerable. I think it's important for us to share our truth and how hard it is sometimes for us to keep it all together. Because if we can show that truth and lead with empathy, then when we think about the job to be done around mental health, we will unlock many new ideas. We will make sure that we understand that people's lives cannot be compartmentalized. We will understand that the general casual conversation, "Are you okay?" has taken on a new meaning. And I think that as leaders, it will allow us to recognize that when people feel seen, when people feel heard, when people say that if I really am navigating some rough waters before I showed up in class or before I showed up in the office, that we will give them grace and allow them to take a breath. I think there's dividends to be rewarded. I think we as leaders will unlock people's full potential because we allow them to take a breath. I think we will be able to lead a national dialogue around mental health in a way that there will be no shame, no difference than us wearing glasses. To say, you know what, I can't see 2020, but with a little bit of help, put a little flavor on it, life is good. And I think with mental health, it's the same. We have to take out the shame and the judgment. We have to recognize that our young people are heavy. And we have to recognize that sometimes we are too as leaders. And so I'm optimistic that we're talking about mental health. And I'm optimistic that we ourselves will be okay sharing some of our stories when we're not always okay, because I think that will give people permission, students, faculty, and staff, to have the courage to take advantage of all the resources that we're working hard to provide. But we have to make sure that we also give them permission to go for that, to make sure that they can come to work whole and ready to do the work.
Thank you. So who are some of your sheroes or heroes?
Oh my God. So she asked me who are some of my sheroes and heroes. So here's what I would say to you all. Heroes and sheroes and churros. No, I was like a little hungry. No. We are in California, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, heroes and sheroes are all around us. My executive assistant is my shero. The way she puts me first is something to be admired. My chief of staff, Mike T., who is here, and the way he works extraordinarily hard to ensure that I have everything that I need to show up. So I believe that our heroes and sheroes are all around us. Again, if we do not subscribe to titles, we will be able to see the extraordinary in everyone. I also believe that my heroes and sheroes are not just those who are living, but also those who have passed. And so you can have a fierce board of directors. My board is so dope. I mean, you can have people like Rosie Brown, but you can also have a Maya Angelou. You can have Dr. King. You can have Shirley Chisholm. You can have your entire board, dead and alive, that can inspire you every day. But I think the most important thing is that those who inspire us, at least those who inspire me, there is no age minimum. My 5-year-old inspires me. There is no age maximum. There is no rented title that makes me see you more than I see the other. And I think that if we do that, we will be able to receive all that life has to offer us, because we're able to receive all of the best gifts in everyone, because they're all around us. You just have to be open to receive it. And I just think that's how I think about heroes and sheroes. They're the ordinary people. They're the cooks and the janitors. They're the people who served us today with excellence.
So what principles do you rely on as a leader? What do you think about and what drives you?
There's so many principles, but if I had to narrow them down, character is important. Character. Because I think clearly as leaders of universities in business, we're not always going to do everything well. We will fall short of expectation. But our character gives you grace. What was my intent? And if you have, and when you lead with your character, you will lead with that level of transparency. You will lead with vulnerability to say, I will not have all the answers and I will disappoint you, but when I do, I will own those decisions, and I will work extraordinarily hard to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So character. Intellectual curiosity, clearly you all are leading the future. But intellectual curiosity is something that is really important to me because the world is changing, and it's changing at a velocity that we've never seen before. And so what you need is not just to hire for the skill set, but the mindset. You have to hire for the mindset. And then lastly, I do think that it is important to talk more about empathy. You know, I think more than ever, I think the future of leadership are those of us who can connect, who can have an empathetic mindset in terms of how we lead. It does not mean that we compromise our standards. In fact, you'll elevate the standards when you lead with empathy, because if I can connect with you, I can talk about your potential. I can unlock the innovation. And so character, intellectual curiosity, and I do think as we're thinking through where we are today, and especially with all of the polarization in our country, empathy can create bridges. It's not about being right or wrong, but let's make impact. And I think even with leaders, many times it's not about the right or the wrong. It's about, are we making progress with the information that we have, and having the ability to change our minds or to evolve or to adapt based on the facts and the situation that's in front of us. And so that's what I look for.
About being the change and the art of possibility. Tell us more about that.
Wow, so one of the things we say at TIAA is to be the change. And when I think about be the change, that is anchored in the art of possibility. The audacity to say that every person has the ability to be the change, which then can incorporate an enterprise being the change. And so this year marks the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and also HER's organization, 50th anniversary. And so when I think about that, 50 years, I have a sports background. I know the president of Baylor, where I received my MBA, has a sports background. And so when I think about what sports has instilled in me, grit, tenacity, teamwork on any given day, I did shoot 7 for 9 for the three-point line in high school. So, I mean, I like metrics. But the reason why I talk about be the change, it's 50 years later. And the reality is there's only been 3 Black women ever, full-time. When we look at presidents of R1 universities, 22%, I believe, are women. And of that, only 5% of women of color, even though women are representing 61% of graduates. When I look at every metric, we have made progress, yes, we have, but we are not where we need to be. And when you say, well, what does that all equal? Women are still making 82 cents on the dollar. When you look at the impact of COVID, where 1.8 million women exited the workforce, that's close to 2 million women no longer contributing to their retirement. The power of compounding has put them behind. And then when you look at Title IX and all of the progress that we've made, we've launched this campaign, Retire Inequality, because women are retiring 30% less than men in terms of their retirement income. And so for me, when I think about be the change, change is in motion, and we at TIAA, in partnering with all of you, I think there's more to be done when we think about what it means to be the change. We need more representation at every level. And we also need to make sure that that representation equates to being able to have real equity when it comes to retirement. 30% less when women are the heads of households is something that I think for us, we wake up every day with that fire in the belly. And lastly, I would say the be the change is what we all have the ability to do, the power of one. You know, we always say, don't talk about it, be about it. And so I just think that we all have the opportunity to be the change. And at TIAA, what that means for us is being able to make sure that everyone can retire with dignity and have the same level of equity when you think about those dollars to be recycled, and what that means when your daughters and your sons do not have to carry that burden of taking care of mom and dad while they're also raising their children and trying to make it. That's how we can close this wealth divide, if we can make sure that at this part of the journey, you know, we're taking care of those at that stage. And we have work to do, but I think we can all be the change.
You are amazing, and you inspire us. You inspire us, and we feel like we're in great hands with you as a leader.
Well, let me say thank you. Thank you to you. We had breakfast this morning, and you shared that within her first year of being president of your university, her home was impacted with the wildfire, and she lost everything. Everything. And so when you think about grit, tenacity, when you think about your family immigrated to this country, and here you are, and I rise, and I rise. And so you inspired me today. You inspired me to make sure that I do my part in being the change and seeing, can we make sure that more Japanese American women are ascending, more Native American women are ascending, more Latinas are ascending. So thank you to you. And I would be remiss, and I know we're at time, the power of allyship is important. We as women cannot be the end-all be-all and expect that we will have progress. It is people like you, Ted. So I just want to remind us all that as we think about what we all can do, it is a we thing. And that means our allyship. And so when we think about the question of how we all can be the change, let's make sure that we're bringing men to the table. And let's make sure that we are holding them accountable to be on this journey with us as well. That's how we can make real progress. And thank you, Ted, for being a great example of that. So thank you. Thank you.
Wow. It's amazing. You are amazing.